The night hung heavy over the abandoned dockyard, a dense fog rolling across rusted shipping containers and slick steel walkways, every shadow stretching and twisting like a predator waiting to strike, and Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved through it with a silence that was unnatural, boots barely making a sound, rifle cradled in exact alignment with his body, breath measured, pulse steady, eyes scanning every inch of terrain, calculating distance, angles, wind, and humidity as though the environment itself were an enemy to be conquered, because in this mission, detection meant immediate death, and every step, every movement, and every slight noise could tip the balance between life and oblivion. And as Ghost crouched behind a corroded shipping container, he noted the first flicker of light along the perimeter, a single flashlight moving with reckless confidence, unaware that a phantom already watched, calculating the exact moment to strike, and with a soft squeeze of the trigger, the first enemy went down, dropping silently into the shadows. A ghostly figure erased before the alarm could be raised, and as Ghost adjusted his position, scanning the compound with eyes that caught the slightest glint of metal, every step he took was deliberate, precise, avoiding debris, puddles, and unstable surfaces, mapping exit points, cover, and choke points in his mind while the enemy scrambled to understand what had just happened. Confusion and panic spreading as whispers of a ghost began among those who remained, a presence unseen yet deadly, striking with perfect timing and calculated force, and as he moved along the edge of the dockyard, eliminating mercenaries with precise headshots, muffled suppressor cracks and calculated bursts that left no evidence of origin, he coordinated in his mind with every possible scenario: backup threats, sniper overwatch, environmental hazards, and extraction points, because in a mission like this, anticipation was as lethal as the bullet, and a single miscalculation could cascade into catastrophe. And when a small squad of mercenaries attempted to regroup and flank from a side dock, Ghost had already predicted the movement, calculating trajectories, angles, and timing down to fractions of a second, and with methodical precision, he neutralized two more before they could alert the others, leaving the remaining squad frozen, disoriented, and terrified, unable to comprehend the phantom that stalked them. And as the night deepened, shadows stretching further across the fog-shrouded warehouse yards, Ghost continued to move, silent, deadly, orchestrating chaos into a controlled, precise pattern of elimination, every shot calculated for efficiency and effect, every movement designed to maintain cover, concealment, and tactical advantage, while his mind ran through contingencies, anticipating reinforcements, escape attempts, and the timing of helicopter extraction, because mastery on the battlefield demanded constant vigilance, anticipation, and adaptation. And as he observed a lone mercenary attempt to escape to a high perch on a rusted crane, Ghost adjusted for elevation, wind, and distance, firing a shot that struck cleanly, removing the threat before any alarm could be raised, and the remaining enemies, now fully aware of an unseen presence that seemed to move like a shadow among them, panicked, voices rising in terror, footsteps erratic, but Ghost's control over the environment remained absolute, eyes scanning, calculations running ahead of the action, every angle accounted for, and when a small group tried to coordinate a counterattack, he anticipated their positions, suppressing them with lethal accuracy while signaling the squad's extraction route in his mind, memorizing points of cover, lines of sight, and environmental hazards that could turn deadly if overlooked. And as the first helicopter approached, dust and rotor wash kicking up fog and debris, Ghost ensured the zone was clear, no enemy left to compromise the mission, every exit covered, and yet no one had seen him, no one knew his rank, his name, or even his face, because the mission depended not on recognition but on execution. And as the SEAL team arrived for cleanup, finding the target neutralized and the perimeter completely secure, each operator instinctively paused and saluted toward the darkness, acknowledging the skill, courage, and deadly efficiency of the unseen figure who had protected them, eliminated threats, and maintained absolute battlefield control. And in that moment, a legend was born, whispered among elite operatives, feared by enemies and respected without question, a phantom whose presence had rewritten the rules of engagement. And as Ghost vanished silently into the fog, leaving no footprints, no trace of his passage, no name to attach to the deadly figure who had orchestrated such flawless precision, he already calculated the next mission, anticipating enemy behavior, environmental variables, extraction routes, reinforcements, and contingencies, because even in moments of victory, the battlefield demanded attention, foresight, and preparation. And the legend of the Ghost Shooter grew, carried in whispered respect, fearful speculation, and awe among every SEAL who had seen his work, a name that needed no rank, no title, no identification, only the silent recognition that someone had moved through death and chaos with unmatched skill, and that same someone would strike again wherever precision, stealth, and lethal efficiency were required. And as the night receded into early morning, fog lifting, shadows stretching, Ghost's mind never stopped calculating, scanning, predicting, because survival, mastery, and legend demanded constant vigilance. And though the SEALs would speak his name in hushed tones, fear and respect mingling in every syllable, no one would ever know the face behind the rifle, the thoughts behind the actions, or the man who had become a ghost. And as the sun began to pierce the foggy horizon, glinting off rusted metal and reflecting across still waters, Ghost vanished completely, a silent silhouette among shadows, leaving only the memory of a perfect operation, a phantom who answered to no rank, no name, but commanded respect, fear, and awe. And in the quiet aftermath, as the SEALs saluted and whispered his legend, one truth was unmistakable. The ghost shooter existed, unstoppable, untouchable, and eternal, and the battlefield would never be the same. The first rays of dawn barely touched the horizon as Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer crouched atop a steel girder overlooking the extraction zone, the fog still clinging stubbornly to the docks, water lapping quietly against rusted hulls below, and though the SEAL extraction team was inbound, Ghost knew better than to assume safety until every angle was secured, every threat neutralized, because in this line of work, one missed detail could be fatal. And as he scanned the perimeter through his scope, a glint of metal on the far pier caught his eye, a sniper likely waiting for the evac, calculating trajectories, anticipating panic, unaware that Ghost had already anticipated his line of fire, position, and likely escape path, and with calm precision, he adjusted for distance, wind, and elevation, squeezing off a suppressed round that removed the threat silently, while below the SEALs approached, their engines muted for stealth, unaware that the entire perimeter had already been cleared by a phantom who moved faster than their eyes could follow, bullets finding marks before reactions could occur. And as the chopper hovered low, rotor wash stirring fog and spray, Ghost signaled the squad silently, hand gestures precise, guiding them through the maze of shadows and containers, every move calculated to avoid exposure, every path chosen for cover. And as the first SEAL climbed aboard, a sudden flare of gunfire erupted from the far side of the dock, a squad of mercenaries attempting to intercept the extraction with reckless courage. But Ghost was already ahead of them, calculating trajectories, timing angles of cover, suppressive fire, and escape routes simultaneously, moving like a shadow between shadows, each step deliberate, controlled, and lethal, bullets striking with surgical precision, ricocheting off metal, concrete, and water in ways designed to create chaos for the enemy while keeping the SEALs safe. And as mercenaries faltered under the unseen threat, Ghost anticipated reinforcements, plotting every possible trajectory, adjusting for wind drift, humidity, temperature, and bullet drop, while orchestrating suppressive fire, flank protection, and cover with nothing more than silent gestures and micro-movements. And when a second wave of attackers tried to flank the extraction from the crane yards, Ghost had already calculated the exact timing, positioning, and countermeasure, firing rounds that neutralized threats mid-movement before the SEALs could even react, creating a corridor of safety through chaos. And the SEALs, aware only of the safe path, followed instinctively, trusting the unseen guidance of the Ghost shooter who had turned ambush into controlled precision. And as the helicopter finally touched down, rotor wash violent, fog swirling like smoke from a battlefield, Ghost ensured every boarding point was covered, clearing remaining targets, neutralizing distant threats, and guiding each SEAL aboard with silent efficiency, because in his mind, every second counted, every movement had consequence, and failure was not an option. And as the last soldier ascended, Ghost himself slipped onto the gangway unnoticed, merging into the shadows as the helicopter lifted, engines roaring, dust and water spray swirling, while below, the mercenaries struggled to comprehend the invisible force that had dismantled their assault. And as the chopper climbed, Ghost scanned the horizon, eyes sweeping valleys, ridges, and rooftops, already calculating the next potential threats, extraction points, enemy behavior patterns, and escape routes for future operations, because survival demanded vigilance even in moments of success. And though the SEALs cheered quietly, relieved, exhausted, and full of respect, Ghost remained silent, his mind calculating, his body tense, every sense alert for the next possible engagement, while rumors began circulating among the team, whispers of a ghost who moved like wind, struck like lightning, and vanished like mist, a phantom whose skill defied rank, name, or identification. And as the chopper soared above the dockyard, sunlight glinting off metal and water, Ghost allowed himself a brief assessment of the operation, noting timing, trajectory efficiency, suppressive fire effectiveness, and squad positioning, cataloging every variable that could have gone wrong. analyzing contingencies, anticipating enemy adaptation, because the battlefield never truly slept, and neither could the one who had mastered it. And as the squad relaxed, slightly exchanging quiet acknowledgments of admiration and astonishment, Ghost remained a shadow in their midst, calm, precise, untouchable, a living legend already in motion, and though no one had seen his face, knew his name or identified his rank, every SEAL aboard instinctively saluted silently, a tribute to the silent orchestrator of survival, precision, and lethal efficiency. And as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the harbor, Ghost kept scanning, calculating, anticipating, whispering to himself almost inaudibly, extraction complete. But the battlefield never rests, a mantra, a promise, and a reminder that while today's mission had ended successfully, tomorrow would bring new threats, new ambushes, new tests of skill, calm, and deadly precision, and that he, the Ghost shooter, would be ready, silent, lethal, and unstoppable, a phantom in the fog, a master of shadows, a soldier with no rank, no name, yet a legend that every SEAL would salute, fear, and respect for the rest of their lives. The forest beyond the enemy compound was a tangle of shadows and twisted branches, and Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved through it with the silence of a predator, every footstep calculated to avoid snapping twigs, every breath measured, every sense alert to the faintest sound, movement, or scent that might betray his presence, because in this operation infiltration demanded perfection, and even the smallest mistake could alert sentries, compromise the mission, or cost lives. And as Ghost crouched behind a gnarled tree, he observed two enemy patrols converging along a narrow path, noting their pace, spacing, weapon orientation, and the subtle signals they exchanged with hand gestures and murmured commands. And in that instant, he calculated the trajectory of every bullet, the angles of every sight line, the wind currents that would affect long-range shots, and the timing required to strike without detection, because precision and patience were as lethal as the rifle itself. And as the patrols drew closer, Ghost slipped a small suppressor onto his sidearm, removed his rifle from its sling, and prepared to engage, waiting for the perfect alignment of target, angle, and cover. And with a single, controlled squeeze of the trigger, the first patrol member collapsed silently, the bullet hitting with exact placement to prevent sound from traveling beyond a whisper. And before the second soldier could react, another round struck him with similar precision, leaving the third momentarily confused, looking for an invisible assailant. And Ghost, already calculating the next move, adjusted position slightly, merging with the shadows as he dispatched the final target, every motion controlled, fluid, and undetectable, while the surrounding forest remained eerily quiet, as though the night itself had acknowledged the presence of a ghost. And as he moved deeper into the enemy territory, the terrain became more treacherous, thick underbrush, loose rocks, and hidden gullies, requiring constant adjustments of footing, weight distribution, and body posture to maintain concealment and readiness. And when a sudden rustle in the distance indicated a new patrol, Ghost froze, analyzing movement patterns, predicting their approach, and calculating the optimal timing to intercept without raising alarm. And as the soldiers moved into his calculated kill zone, he dispatched them silently, the shots muffled, deliberate, leaving no trace, no sound beyond the faintest disturbance of leaves and dust. And in the moments between engagements, Ghost scanned the perimeter for tripwires, booby traps, and environmental hazards, noting enemy surveillance positions, reinforcing cover points, and memorizing alternate paths for extraction or future attacks. Because in this silent war, knowledge and anticipation were as powerful as bullets, and every misstep could prove fatal. And as he approached a small clearing where the main communications hub was located, Ghost observed enemy snipers positioned on high ridges, scanning lines of fire across the terrain, and with meticulous calculation he adjusted for angle, elevation, wind, distance, and mirage effect, dispatching each sniper with perfect timing before they could signal alarm, leaving the hub accessible for infiltration. And as he moved closer, he noted the enemy's rotation patterns, patrol gaps, and blind spots, creating a mental map of the entire compound, every sensor, camera, and lookout accounted for, every potential line of fire memorized, while his body remained low, movements precise, and breath controlled, because stealth demanded total control over every variable. And as he infiltrated the perimeter, bypassing lasers, alarms, and traps, he placed microcharges on critical infrastructure, timing them to disable communications and prevent reinforcement calls, while ensuring no civilian presence would be affected, because precision extended beyond bullets into planning, morality, and consequence. And when the first detonation silenced the communications hub, Ghost already had the next target in mind, adjusting positions, calculating angles, anticipating enemy behavior, and coordinating potential exfiltration routes for himself and future SEAL operations. And as he moved through the shadows, eliminating patrols silently, neutralizing threats without detection, he felt the familiar rhythm of calculated danger, measured breath, and controlled lethality. Every action precise, every thought focused, every motion deliberate, because in this silent war, the battlefield existed in the mind as much as in the physical terrain. And as he reached the heart of the enemy compound, observing key targets, supply caches, and reinforcement points, Ghost allowed himself a brief, mental acknowledgement of his skill, the culmination of years of training, instinct, and battlefield experience, while the fog of early morning began to lift, revealing details of terrain, enemy positions, and potential hazards. And with each step, each shot, each calculation, the legend of the Ghost shooter grew, unseen, untouchable, a phantom moving through enemy territory with absolute control. And as he disappeared into the deeper shadows of the compound, already planning the next series of engagements, anticipating enemy responses, and calculating exfiltration strategies, he understood that the silent war was far from over, that every move, every engagement, and every mission would demand absolute precision, unwavering calm, and lethal foresight. And though no one knew his name, rank, or face, every SEAL who had witnessed his actions, every enemy who had felt the shadow of his presence, and every whisper among elite operatives would acknowledge the same truth. The Ghost shooter existed, unstoppable, untouchable, and eternally present in the battlefield's shadows. And as the sun pierced the fog, casting long, sharp shadows across the compound, Ghost continued forward, a silent storm of calculated violence and unyielding precision, leaving only a trail of awe, fear, and respect in his wake, because mastery demanded it, survival required it, and legend was born in moments like these, unseen, silent, and eternal. The night pressed down over the mountainous enemy encampment like a living thing, darkness pooling in every crevice, every ridge, and Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved through the jagged terrain with an almost supernatural quiet, every step measured against loose rocks, hidden roots, and shifting gravel, boots barely making a sound as he approached the perimeter, aware that the slightest noise could alert sentries, trigger alarms, or cost lives. And as he crouched behind a jagged boulder, surveying the camp below, he noted patterns in the guards' rotations, the faint pulse of lights from watchtowers, and the way shadows shifted as soldiers moved between structures, calculating every angle, distance, and timing for a potential strike. Because in this high-stakes mission, anticipation was as lethal as any weapon, and one misstep could escalate into disaster. And as Ghost advanced silently along a narrow ridge, wind gusting unpredictably through the canyon, he observed a high-value target moving toward an armored vehicle, flanked by elite mercenaries, unaware that a shadow 300 meters above had already locked onto their movements. And with precise calculation for wind, elevation, humidity, and bullet drop, Ghost prepared for a shot that could neutralize the target without triggering mass panic. And as he exhaled slowly, aligning his scope, he fired, the silenced round striking perfectly, and the target collapsed silently while the surrounding mercenaries turned in confusion, attempting to locate the phantom that had claimed one of their own. And as Ghost shifted his position, maintaining cover and recalculating angles, he noted that the enemy was beginning to adapt, moving unpredictably, changing patrol patterns, scanning with flashlights, setting tripwires, and yet he anticipated every maneuver, countering with precise, silent eliminations, each action fluid, efficient, and undetectable, while his mind tracked every possible contingency, escape route, and reinforcements that might be called. And as a sniper emerged from an elevated tower, Ghost was already several steps ahead, adjusting for distance, wind, and angle, neutralizing the threat before it could signal, leaving the tower eerily silent once again. And below, the camp erupted into controlled chaos, soldiers yelling, weapons firing sporadically, unaware that every movement they made had been anticipated, and every threat neutralized before it could become a problem. And as Ghost advanced closer to the compound, he noted a new danger. A small team of enemy operatives had been deployed as a counter-ambush, moving along a narrow ravine that could have trapped him if miscalculated, and instantly he calculated angles, lines of sight, timing, and potential obstacles, planning the next series of moves with precision that bordered on preternatural, dispatching threats silently, one by one, using terrain, shadows, and misdirection, until the path ahead was secure. And as he approached the edge of the camp, he identified a secondary objective, a communications hub controlling reinforcements, drones, and local patrols, critical to ensuring mission success. And with careful placement of microcharges he prepared to disable it, timing every detonation to coincide with enemy distraction. ensuring maximum effect while remaining undetected, and when the first charge went off, communications fell silent, lights flickered, and chaos spread among the remaining soldiers, giving Ghost the opening to continue his infiltration. And as he moved deeper, he encountered an unexpected threat. A small, elite enemy strike team had been dispatched to hunt the Ghost shooter, and for the first time he felt a spike of adrenaline, acknowledging that even legends face danger. And as they closed in, moving with lethal intent, Ghost adapted instantly, calculating trajectories, positioning, timing, and suppression using shadows, terrain, and controlled fire to eliminate each threat before they could react, a deadly dance of anticipation and precision, leaving no trace, no warning, only the silent elimination of danger. And as he finally reached the heart of the camp, he observed critical targets secured, high-value assets ready for extraction. And yet the threat was far from over, enemy patrols still alive, alarms silent but tension rising, and Ghost moved to secure escape routes, mark extraction points, and prepare for rapid withdrawal, all while remaining unseen, untouchable, and lethal, a shadow among shadows, a legend in motion. And as the first rays of moonlight pierced the canyon, glinting off weapons and armor, Ghost calculated wind, temperature, and trajectory for one final move, ensuring complete control of the battlefield, neutralizing the last visible threats without revealing his position. And as he slipped into the surrounding darkness to await extraction, he reflected briefly on the precision, anticipation, and composure that had brought him this far, understanding that mastery demanded constant vigilance, total control, and relentless focus, because the battlefield never slept, and neither could the Ghost shooter. And as helicopters approached from the distant horizon, engines muted for stealth, Ghost ensured that each path was clear, every obstacle accounted for, and every threat eliminated, moving silently to the pickup zone, ready to exfiltrate without detection, while the remaining enemy forces scrambled helplessly, unable to comprehend how one soldier, without rank, without name, had moved like a shadow among them, striking with perfect timing and lethal precision. And as the squad loaded onto the helicopter, saluting silently in respect for the Phantom who had saved lives, eliminated threats, and secured victory, Ghost vanished once more into the night, leaving behind a trail of awe, fear, and whispered legend, a reminder to friend and foe alike that the battlefield was his domain, and that no one, no matter how trained or prepared, would ever underestimate the Ghost shooter, whose skill, anticipation, and silent authority would continue to dominate the shadows, the night, and the hearts of all who witnessed or feared his presence, because mastery, stealth, and lethal precision were eternal, and the legend of the Ghost shooter would endure as long as the battlefield remained, untouchable, unstoppable, and unseen. The dead of night cloaked the fortified compound in an almost suffocating darkness, Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moving like a shadow along the perimeter, every step deliberate, every breath measured, eyes scanning for patrols, sensors, and tripwires that could betray his presence, because in this mission, stealth was as lethal as the bullets in his rifle, and one miscalculation could mean death for him and compromise the SEAL team waiting on the extraction point. And as Ghost crouched behind a stack of crates, he observed the enemy rotations with meticulous attention, noting timing, spacing, and behavior patterns, memorizing every patrol, every blind spot, and every line of sight, calculating angles, wind, and distances in a mental map that allowed him to move undetected, anticipating threats before they even materialized. And when a lone sentry shifted position, adjusting his flashlight, Ghost was already several meters away in shadow, ready to strike with precision. And with a muffled suppressor, the sentry collapsed silently, unaware of the Phantom moving in the darkness, leaving the remaining guards confused and vulnerable. And as he advanced toward the central command hub, he identified multiple high-value targets, from weapons caches to intel servers, each requiring careful planning and execution. And with an almost surgical efficiency, he neutralized the closest threats, moving fluidly, silently, and invisibly, while simultaneously calculating contingencies for reinforcements that might arrive, escape routes in case of exposure, and environmental hazards like broken flooring, electrified fences, and guard dogs, because in this world, anticipation and preparation were as important as precision marksmanship. And as Ghost approached the main control room, he placed micro-explosives on critical infrastructure, timing them to coincide with a moment of distraction among enemy forces, ensuring maximum disruption without leaving himself exposed. And when the charges detonated, lights flickered, alarms went silent, and confusion rippled through the compound as guards scrambled to assess the situation, unaware that the unseen presence orchestrating chaos was already on the move, controlling every element of the battlefield with calculated steps, measured breaths, and lethal precision. and as he infiltrated deeper, a small strike team attempted to intercept him, moving with tactical coordination, weapons trained, yet Ghost anticipated their movements. Calculating angles, lines of sight, and timing, neutralizing each one before they could even react, turning ambush into control, chaos into silent victory, and as he reached the heart of the compound, the central hub where intel and communications were concentrated, he worked with the precision of a surgeon, placing charges, overriding systems, and downloading critical data while remaining unseen, untouchable, and lethal, every movement calculated, every decision measured for consequence. Because the mission demanded perfection and failure was not an option, and when a drone suddenly swept the area, scanning for heat signatures, Ghost slipped into shadows, adjusting his position to remain invisible, using terrain, cover, and natural shadows to evade detection, while simultaneously analyzing the drone's flight pattern, speed, and sensor range to predict the next sweep, ensuring complete concealment. And as the last threat was neutralized and the central hub secured, Ghost retreated toward his pre-planned extraction route, moving fluidly through darkness, aware of every footstep, every sound, every possible angle of exposure, while the enemy scrambled to understand what had happened, unable to explain how a single soldier without rank, without name, had penetrated the heart of their defenses, neutralized threats with surgical precision, and disappeared without trace. And as the extraction team arrived at the designated point, Ghost guided them silently, covering angles, ensuring that no enemy could interfere with their departure. And as the SEALs boarded, acknowledging the unseen protector with hushed nods and silent salutes, Ghost merged once more with the shadows, vanishing into the night, leaving behind a trail of awe, fear, and whispered legend, a presence that had turned an impossible mission into flawless execution, because mastery, patience, precision, and anticipation were as lethal as any weapon, and the Ghost shooter had demonstrated that in the dead of night, invisibility and skill could define the battlefield. And as the helicopter lifted, engines muffled, fog curling around the rotors, Ghost surveyed the terrain one last time, calculating contingencies for potential follow-up attacks, escape routes, and enemy adaptations, because the war never truly ended, and neither could a soldier who had mastered silence, precision, and lethal foresight, and though no one knew his name, no one could claim rank over him, and yet every SEAL who had witnessed his actions instinctively saluted, acknowledging the unmatched skill, courage, and presence of the Ghost shooter, whose legend would grow, untouchable, unstoppable, and eternal, a shadow in the night that would strike with perfect timing, lethal efficiency, and surgical precision wherever the battlefield demanded, leaving enemies in fear, allies in awe, and the world forever aware that a single soldier without rank or name could become a force greater than any army because Ghost existed, unseen, silent, and omnipresent, a legend in motion, a master of shadows, and the invisible strike had only just begun. The wind howled through the canyons surrounding the enemy encampment, carrying with it the scent of smoke, metal, and the faintest trace of adrenaline, and Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved with his usual silent precision, boots barely disturbing the gravel, rifle ready, eyes scanning every shadow for movement, because tonight, the hunter risked becoming the hunted, and he knew it, every sense alert to the subtle cues that might reveal danger, and as he approached a narrow ravine providing the only viable path for exfiltration, he noticed subtle disturbances in the terrain, footprints too fresh, disturbed foliage, and the faintest glint of a scope reflecting moonlight, evidence that someone knew he was coming, and immediately his mind raced, calculating enemy positions, potential traps, timing, and angles, adjusting every step, every motion to maintain stealth while anticipating counterattacks, because in this moment, overconfidence could be fatal, and the Ghost shooter was nothing if not aware of consequence, and as he slipped along the ridge, avoiding the line of sight of a hidden sniper, he observed another team moving through the canyon below, elite operatives clearly sent to intercept him, and Ghost instinctively adjusted for wind, distance, elevation, and trajectory, plotting each move like a chess master several steps ahead of the enemy, while simultaneously tracking escape routes, cover points, and potential ambush zones, and when the first enemy sniper raised his weapon, Ghost fired with perfect timing, a suppressed round finding its mark before the alarm could be raised, but more enemies had been deployed, converging from multiple directions, forcing him to shift from hunter to tactical evader, moving fluidly through rocks, shadows, and dips in the terrain, neutralizing threats only when absolutely necessary to maintain cover, all while analyzing enemy movement patterns, predicting reinforcements, and maintaining situational awareness for every possible contingency. And as the team below attempted to flank him, Ghost employed decoys, misdirection, and carefully timed suppression, turning enemy strategy against itself, leading them into positions where they could be neutralized without compromising his own concealment. And as he reached a narrow ledge overlooking a river that would provide temporary cover, he paused, recalculating the remaining threats, assessing distances, lines of fire, and angles for potential engagement. And though the tension was palpable, his body remained calm, movements controlled, breath steady, because mastery demanded composure even under the highest stress. And as the enemy realized they were dealing with a phantom, confusion and fear spread, bullets sparking against rocks, ricocheting, missing by inches, while Ghost continued his silent advance, neutralizing only when absolutely necessary, leaving no trace of his path except the subtle whispers of legend beginning to circulate among enemy ranks. And when a sudden flare illuminated part of the canyon, revealing a sniper team that had been waiting for him, Ghost reacted instantly, calculating wind, trajectory, distance, and cover, firing suppressed rounds with lethal precision, each shot dispatched before they could signal reinforcements, while simultaneously moving toward cover and calculating the next threats, his mind running through multiple scenarios at once, because in the shadows, anticipation was survival and hesitation was death. And as the last sniper fell silently, Ghost realized this was the most coordinated opposition he had ever faced, elite operatives working in tandem, anticipating standard tactics. Yet even in this extreme pressure he adapted, using terrain, shadows, and precise movement to create opportunities, exploiting the smallest mistakes. And as he advanced along the riverbank he set subtle traps, misdirected enemy patrols, and created illusions of presence in multiple locations, all while maintaining a path to extraction, because in this game of survival, deception and anticipation were as deadly as bullets, and every movement was calculated with lethal foresight. And as helicopters approached from a distance, engines muffled, ready for extraction, Ghost ensured that each path was clear, each potential obstacle accounted for, and each remaining threat neutralized without exposing himself, moving like a shadow through chaos, a phantom in motion, lethal, invisible, untouchable, and yet completely aware of the danger surrounding him. And when the extraction point was finally reached, the SEAL team boarded silently, saluting the phantom who had navigated the deadliest of hunts, a soldier without rank, without name, but whose skill, precision, and awareness had turned what could have been a deadly ambush into a flawless tactical victory. And as the helicopter lifted, rotor wash kicking fog and dust into the canyon, Ghost scanned the horizon, calculating next moves, anticipating enemy adaptation, and maintaining complete mental control over every detail of the battlefield, because even when hunted, he remained the master. And though no one knew his face, name, or rank, every SEAL aboard instinctively saluted, whispering the legend of the Ghost shooter, the hunter who became prey and yet emerged untouchable, unstoppable, a phantom whose presence would haunt enemy minds, inspire allies, and ensure that no battlefield, no matter how treacherous, would ever be without the shadow of a soldier who answered to nothing but precision, anticipation, and lethal mastery. And as the night deepened, Ghost disappeared once more into the darkened horizon, leaving only awe, fear, and legend behind, a reminder that mastery demanded vigilance, adaptability, and calm under fire, and that the Ghost shooter was eternal, untouchable, and ever-present in the shadows where battles are won or lost before bullets even fly. The wind howled through the canyons surrounding the enemy encampment, carrying with it the scent of smoke, metal, and the faintest trace of adrenaline. And Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved with his usual silent precision, boots barely disturbing the gravel, rifle ready, eyes scanning every shadow for movement, because tonight, the hunter risked becoming the hunted, and he knew it, every sense alert to the subtle cues that might reveal danger. And as he approached a narrow ravine providing the only viable path for exfiltration, he noticed subtle disturbances in the terrain, footprints too fresh, disturbed foliage, and the faintest glint of a scope reflecting moonlight, evidence that someone knew he was coming. And immediately his mind raced, calculating enemy positions, potential traps, timing, and angles, adjusting every step, every motion to maintain stealth while anticipating counterattacks, because in this moment, overconfidence could be fatal, and the Ghost shooter was nothing if not aware of consequence. And as he slipped along the ridge, avoiding the line of sight of a hidden sniper, he observed another team moving through the canyon below, elite operatives clearly sent to intercept him, and Ghost instinctively adjusted for wind, distance, elevation, and trajectory, plotting each move like a chess master several steps ahead of the enemy, while simultaneously tracking escape routes, cover points, and potential ambush zones. And when the first enemy sniper raised his weapon, Ghost fired with perfect timing, a suppressed round finding its mark before the alarm could be raised. But more enemies had been deployed, converging from multiple directions, forcing him to shift from hunter to tactical evader, moving fluidly through rocks, shadows, and dips in the terrain, neutralizing threats only when absolutely necessary to maintain cover, all while analyzing enemy movement patterns, predicting reinforcements, and maintaining situational awareness for every possible contingency. And as the team below attempted to flank him, Ghost employed decoys, misdirection, and carefully timed suppression, turning enemy strategy against itself, leading them into positions where they could be neutralized without compromising his own concealment. And as he reached a narrow ledge overlooking a river that would provide temporary cover, he paused, recalculating the remaining threats, assessing distances, lines of fire, and angles for potential engagement. And though the tension was palpable, his body remained calm, movements controlled, breath steady, because mastery demanded composure even under the highest stress. And as the enemy realized they were dealing with a phantom, confusion and fear spread, bullets sparking against rocks, ricocheting, missing by inches, while Ghost continued his silent advance, neutralizing only when absolutely necessary, leaving no trace of his path except the subtle whispers of legend beginning to circulate among enemy ranks. And when a sudden flare illuminated part of the canyon, revealing a sniper team that had been waiting for him, Ghost reacted instantly, calculating wind, trajectory, distance, and cover, firing suppressed rounds with lethal precision, each shot dispatched before they could signal reinforcements, while simultaneously moving toward cover and calculating the next threats, his mind running through multiple scenarios at once, because in the shadows anticipation was survival and hesitation was death. And as the last sniper fell silently, Ghost realized this was the most coordinated opposition he had ever faced, elite operatives working in tandem, anticipating standard tactics. Yet even in this extreme pressure he adapted, using terrain, shadows, and precise movement to create opportunities, exploiting the smallest mistakes. And as he advanced along the riverbank he set subtle traps, misdirected enemy patrols, and created illusions of presence in multiple locations, all while maintaining a path to extraction, because in this game of survival, deception and anticipation were as deadly as bullets, and every movement was calculated with lethal foresight. And as helicopters approached from a distance, engines muffled, ready for extraction, Ghost ensured that each path was clear, each potential obstacle accounted for, and each remaining threat neutralized without exposing himself, moving like a shadow through chaos, a phantom in motion, lethal, invisible, untouchable, and yet completely aware of the danger surrounding him. And when the extraction point was finally reached, the SEAL team boarded silently, saluting the phantom who had navigated the deadliest of hunts, a soldier without rank, without name, but whose skill, precision, and awareness had turned what could have been a deadly ambush into a flawless tactical victory. And as the helicopter lifted, rotor wash kicking fog and dust into the canyon, Ghost scanned the horizon, calculating next moves, anticipating enemy adaptation, and maintaining complete mental control over every detail of the battlefield, because even when hunted, he remained the master. And though no one knew his face, name, or rank, every SEAL aboard instinctively saluted, whispering the legend of the Ghost shooter, the hunter who became prey and yet emerged untouchable, unstoppable, a phantom whose presence would haunt enemy minds, inspire allies, and ensure that no battlefield, no matter how treacherous, would ever be without the shadow of a soldier who answered to nothing but precision, anticipation, and lethal mastery. And as the night deepened, Ghost disappeared once more into the darkened horizon, leaving only awe, fear, and legend behind. A reminder that mastery demanded vigilance, adaptability, and calm under fire, and that the Ghost shooter was eternal, untouchable, and ever-present in the shadows where battles are won or lost before bullets even fly. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the pale light of a rising moon, Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moving like a shadow over jagged rocks and sand dunes, every movement precise, deliberate, measured, because tonight would test everything he had mastered: stealth, anticipation, precision, and lethal efficiency. And as he approached the heavily fortified enemy base, he scanned the compound with calculated focus, noting guard rotations, motion sensors, floodlights, and fortified checkpoints, memorizing every detail in a mental map that would guide each step, each shot, and each tactical maneuver, because failure was not an option and mistakes could cost not only his life but those of his SEAL team and countless others relying on the success of this mission. And when a sniper in a tower rotated slightly, adjusting his scope toward Ghost's position, he had already calculated wind, distance, angle, and trajectory, firing a single suppressed round that removed the threat before detection. And as he advanced deeper into enemy territory he observed squads moving in unpredictable patterns, their communications cut off, forcing them to adapt to chaos he had orchestrated, while he moved fluidly through shadows, using terrain, cover, and psychological misdirection to create illusions of presence in multiple locations, drawing enemies into traps without them realizing, because in the ghost shooter's mind, the battlefield was a chessboard, each soldier, each patrol, each weapon a piece to be manipulated with lethal precision, and as he infiltrated the inner perimeter, he placed microcharges on critical infrastructure, timing each with perfect synchronization to disrupt communications, disable reinforcements, and create opportunities for the SEAL team to strike. And as the first detonations echoed silently through the compound, confusion erupted among the enemy forces, floodlights swinging wildly, radios crackling with static, and mercenaries running blindly into positions Ghost had predicted, unaware that each move had been anticipated, calculated, and exploited. And when a small strike team attempted to flank him from the west, Ghost neutralized them silently using shadows, terrain, and precise shots to eliminate threats before they could even react, while maintaining complete awareness of every angle, exit route, and potential danger. And as he approached the central command bunker, where the high-value targets awaited, he observed elite guards stationed in overlapping fields of fire, their movements synchronized, their discipline flawless. Yet even they could not anticipate the ghost shooter, whose mastery of timing, cover, and anticipation allowed him to approach undetected, disabling surveillance, neutralizing guards, and marking the target for extraction, all while remaining unseen, untouchable, and entirely in control of the environment. And as the SEAL team began their entry, Ghost provided invisible support, guiding them through the chaos with subtle signals, micro-adjustments, and perfectly timed neutralizations, ensuring that no soldier was exposed, no threat unaccounted for, and that every action unfolded in precise coordination, because mastery demanded control over every variable. And in this final strike he was both hunter and protector, orchestrator and executioner, a silent phantom moving among chaos with absolute authority. And when the high-value targets were secured, Ghost prepared for exfiltration, anticipating counterattacks, reinforcements, and environmental hazards, while simultaneously scanning for any unforeseen danger, every nerve on alert, every movement deliberate, because in his world, the battlefield never ceased to demand attention, even after victory seemed assured. And as the extraction helicopters hovered just beyond the compound, engines muted, dust and debris swirling, Ghost ensured every path was clear, covering the SEALs, neutralizing the last pockets of resistance, and moving as a silent guardian, untouchable, unseen, and lethal. And when the team boarded, saluting silently in recognition of the phantom who had enabled their flawless execution, Ghost slipped once more into shadows, disappearing into the desert night, leaving behind only a trail of awe, fear, and whispered legend, a presence that had turned an impossible operation into a flawless victory, demonstrating mastery over anticipation, precision, and silent lethality. And as the helicopters lifted, rotor wash dispersing the fog of battle, Ghost scanned the horizon, already calculating contingencies for future missions, assessing enemy responses, and maintaining complete control over every mental variable of the battlefield, because survival, mastery, and legend demanded perpetual vigilance. And though no one knew his name, no one could claim rank over him, and yet every SEAL who had witnessed his actions instinctively saluted, acknowledging the skill, courage, and lethal authority of the ghost shooter, whose legend would persist across operations, battlefields, and generations, untouchable, unstoppable, a shadow that would strike with perfect timing, lethal precision, and surgical control wherever it was required, leaving enemies in fear, allies in awe, and the world aware that one soldier, without rank, without name, could dominate the battlefield through anticipation, strategy, and absolute mastery, because Ghost existed as a force of nature, unseen, silent, omnipresent, and eternal. And as the desert night stretched on, he vanished once again into the horizon, leaving only whispered tales of a soldier whose presence defined fear, respect, and legend, and whose next move would remain as unpredictable, precise, and unstoppable as the first, a phantom whose mastery of the battlefield would never be questioned and whose story would live forever in silence, shadows, and awe. Dawn broke over the jagged mountain ridges, casting long shadows across the deserted battlefield, and Specialist Alex Ghost Mercer moved silently along the edge of a cliff overlooking the extraction zone, the chaos of the previous night reduced to whispers of smoke, scattered debris, and stunned enemy forces still trying to comprehend the invisible force that had dismantled their defenses. And as he observed the horizon, calculating wind, sunlight angles, and potential threats, he knew the mission was technically over, yet the battlefield never truly rested, and neither could he, because mastery demanded vigilance, precision, and anticipation at all times. and as the SEAL team helicopters lifted into the sky, carrying their secured high-value targets to safety, Ghost remained behind briefly, scanning the terrain for the smallest anomalies, hidden threats, or overlooked dangers, a silent sentinel ensuring that nothing had been left unresolved, and when a faint movement caught his eye, an enemy operative he had missed in the chaos, he acted instantly, neutralizing the threat with a single, muffled round, leaving no trace of his presence except the perfect execution itself. And as he moved away from the compound, descending into the canyon shadows, he considered the enormity of what had transpired, the complexity of every decision, every movement, every calculated risk, because each choice had real consequences, and the lives of his teammates, the success of the mission, and the reputation of the Ghost shooter hung in the balance, and while the world above celebrated the operation's success, Ghost slipped through the rocks and shadows, merging with terrain, adjusting for wind, temperature, and environmental conditions, every step precise, silent, and deliberate, because the battlefield demanded nothing less than perfection, and as he crossed the final ridge toward the extraction point, he reflected on the irony that no one knew his rank, name, or even the face behind the rifle, yet every SEAL who had witnessed his actions saluted instinctively, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement for a legend who existed in shadow, whose skill and presence had altered the course of the mission, and as he reached the outskirts of the canyon, he observed remnants of the enemy, cautious and confused, unable to comprehend how a single soldier had penetrated their strongest defenses, neutralized threats, and vanished without a trace. And though Ghost could have revealed himself, claimed recognition, or accepted accolades, he remained silent, untouchable, invisible, because the Ghost shooter's power lay not in notoriety but in mastery, anticipation, and control, and as he approached the exfiltration coordinates, he paused for a moment, allowing himself a rare breath, scanning the horizon one last time, noting future threats, potential ambush zones, and extraction routes for contingency, because a legend never truly rests, and preparation for the next engagement was already underway, and while the helicopters returned to retrieve him, Ghost moved into deeper shadows, leaving only a whisper of movement, a trace of presence, a legend growing in whispered awe among both friend and foe, and as he finally lifted off, unseen and unclaimed, he looked down at the battlefield below, scars of conflict etched across the terrain, yet knowing that every decision, every calculation, every silent movement had saved lives, secured objectives, and turned chaos into controlled victory, and as the rotors carried him away, he remained lost in thought, reflecting on the paradox of his existence, without rank, without name, and yet commanding respect beyond measure, feared by enemies, revered by allies, and immortalized in the silent, invisible calculus of battlefield mastery. And as the sun rose higher, casting its light over mountains, valleys, and rivers, Ghost allowed himself the faintest smirk, knowing the legend he had created would endure, whispered in corridors of power, training grounds, and battlefields for generations to come. And yet, even as the operation was complete, even as victory was secured, there lingered a tension, a hint of the unknown, because the battlefield never truly ends, and the Ghost shooter's next move, next mission, next engagement remained a mystery, a shadow moving silently in the margins, untouchable, unstoppable, eternal, a legend whose presence would be felt, feared, and revered long after the echoes of this night had faded, leaving friend and foe alike aware of one undeniable truth. The Ghost shooter existed, omnipresent in shadows, invisible yet invincible, a master of anticipation, precision, and lethal efficiency, and though his name, his rank, and his face were unknown, his legend would remain, an eternal phantom haunting every battlefield, shaping every engagement, and leaving every soldier who encountered the aftermath with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that somewhere, always watching, calculating, and ready, the Ghost shooter lived, moved, and struck in silence, because legends are never truly seen, only felt, feared, and remembered. And as the helicopter faded into the horizon, Ghost vanished once again into shadow, leaving only awe, fear, and the promise of untold stories yet to come. The end.